It's my pleasure to introduce Dave O'Connor and Yvonne Owens, who are going to talk about how digital validation was a key enabler to MSD ONECQV. Welcome, guys. Come on up.
Somebody put this. Okay, let's see it. Is this on? Yeah, it's on. Is yours working?
I think so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I'll go over here. Hello all. Wrong way. Okay. Hello everybody. My name is Dave O'Connor. I work for No Deviation. I worked for No Deviation since about 2012. For the past 5 years, I've been mainly working for MSD, based in our site in Ballydyne, mainly working with Yvonne. Introduce.
Yep, so, sorry. I'm working with the global engineering group within MSD. We look after capital projects. So I would work with them I'm the CQV lead for Europe. So I would look after the human health and our animal health products. I suppose these few slides here are just giving an intro to what our department does. So our Global Engineering Solutions, GS, we look after projects, I suppose, all the way, so it's large capital projects. So we would look after from, I suppose, initiation, right through concept, business, all the way through design, construction to C&Q. And then once the equipment is successfully qualified, we would hand it over to the sites then so that they can take it further for operational readiness to manufacture the product. This slide here is just showing all the capital projects that we have around the globe. So it's not all of our sites, but I suppose it shows where GS have capital projects. So at the moment we have 6 sites in Ireland. They're all human health products that capital projects we're working on. And then the rest of our sites, a lot of them are animal health in Europe, and we have sites in the States and Asia as well, where we are doing capital project work. This is just giving an insight to some stats of MSD in Ireland. So we are 50 years in Ireland. Our site in Ballydyne is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. We have 3,600 plus employees in Ireland. We have 6 manufacturing locations, 2 corporate office locations in Ireland, and then in the last couple of years, there has been 3.5 billion invested in Irish operations. And I suppose we export then the products to 60 plus countries from Ireland. So CQV then within GS, I suppose our role, like we normally come in around the design phase, working on the project. We will be setting up strategies as early as that to know, like what kind of way we're going to execute during the C&Q phase. So we will be setting up strategies like ONECQV that we're going to talk to now later. We'd also be kind of looking at things like leveraging, doing single test approaches. We'd also be kind of looking at what's involved in the specific project, what's the schedule, the cost, what type of equipment we have. So from these very early stages, we'd actually be setting up our whole eval folder structure around like what way our systems are, what way we've laid them out or grouped them together. So all of that is set up as early as design.
Okay, just a bit about me and No Deviation. Work for No Deviation. No Deviation was founded about 20 years ago, in 2027. I joined them in 2012. Recently, they've been acquired by E4, one of the largest C&Q providers in the world. Mainly kind of patient-centric, very much support CapEx projects around the C&Q space, also CSV. In the past maybe 5 or 6 years, we've very much focused on digital validation, and that's what we've seen as very much a kind of growth area for No Deviation and E4. That's where we've really specialized in the past couple of years. Part of the my job in MSD was part of the implementation of digital validation tools. And when I started doing that about 5 years ago, we noticed there was quite a lot of questions coming from the industry of what do we do with our paper? How do we quantify our return of investment? How do we have governance over our digital tools? So there was very much a need within the industry to have more guidance. There was very little guidance around digital tools. I think one or two people in the room here, Phil and Dory, are here, maybe one or two more, contributed to this guide, the ISPE guide. I wish I had this guide 5 years ago. It would have made my life a lot easier. For anybody who's about to embark in implementing a digital tool, highly recommend getting this publication. There's actually a talk tomorrow on this as well, if people want more detail on it, in the Shannon tomorrow afternoon. And we'll go through your return of investment, how to implement a digital tool, how to apply best governance, etc. So just a little plug here for the ISP. About MSD and how did MSD approach digital validation. So first of all, we went out to the market and saw what was there. We selected Kneat. In the initial phase, we did a pilot phase rollout to see how it worked in a small project, and we looked at improvements out of that and what could be done better. There was a second phase of rollout, but mainly, I think in Ireland was the Dublin facility is where we, for Kneat, or we rolled it out first, and then we went live globally then in about 5 years ago, in 2021. Ballydyne site was heavily involved in that, in the rollout for Ballydyne, mainly through the CapEx projects. That's where we found the best way to bring this digital tool in, was using CapEx projects. First of all, focusing on CSV and C&Q initially, and then other departments got more interested. This is what we did. We assessed where our digital tools could be best used, and they're pretty much across the board. The only ones I call out were the FAT. We still have the option to use paper here, but I've did some conversations earlier or last night as well with GIA and Fedigari, and it's good to see that they're suppliers of equipment for pharmaceuticals, and they're actually embracing us. I know Fedigari are very much involved. GIA also have Kneat tools, so that's very encouraging to see our vendors actually taking in digital tools, so that makes it a lot easier for us in C&Q to leverage that across into our digital platforms. We also have the option as well in MSD to put it with non-GMP, whether we go paper or digital. Depending on the project and the skill set of the team, we make the decision whether to go paper or digital in that respect, depending on the training. So this slide just shows, probably in the center, with global CSV, and C&Q were kind of drove Kneat into the organization, and then over time it spread out to analytical method transfer, cleaning validation, process validation, shipping qualification. Our VMPs are stored up there, supplier qualification, and we even use it for change control for one of our sites for a period of time. So you can see here that when you bring it in initially for C&Q, over time other departments look at the value of this tool and then they embrace it as well. So it's not just the C&Q CSV tool. This just shows our animal health sites. So this is our where we're moving to next. We've human health. So MSD is divided into probably 3 main categories. Into MMD, it's in animal health and also research. So animal health is the next area that we're starting to roll it out. We've already started in the past couple of years, but this is the next area of growth. Just talking about growth, so total number of users, it's up around 13,000. I just saw in Eddie's slides earlier today, he had 90,000 total. So I think rough maths, MSD make up about 15% of total Kneat users. And there, we don't just give them out to anybody starting. You have to do training. You have to actually be using the tool, and we take the tool is retired as well if people don't use it over a period of time. So these are actual real user numbers.
Okay, so on the ONECQV, I suppose a lot of people are probably wondering what we mean by ONECQV. So I suppose the what is that I suppose within MSD we traditionally had 2 parallel swim lanes for qualification. So we had very much the equipment swim lane and we had the automation swim lane. So the ONECQV is bringing those 2 teams together to work together. So it means like co-authoring documents together, executing where we can, anywhere we can work together to reduce the duplicate efforts and make it more efficient. That's basically what ONECQV is. Now, I know maybe some companies have that implemented, but for MSD, this was very much a big change in mindset. So we have been rolling, I suppose we implemented this 2 years ago. I suppose the next slide will show you maybe why we did this. One of the biggest reasons, I suppose, was all the duplication. So we had, like, for example, for the specs, equipment were writing a URS. They were writing the requirements into the URS spec. Automation, then we were writing an RS. So they were writing all their requirements into the requirement spec, and there was a lot of duplicate requirements. It was the same with the protocols. We had equipment protocols, we had automation protocols, and we were duplicating a lot of our testing. I suppose the other reason that we wanted to move towards this was because this is the way industry are moving. I suppose we knew the CSA was being implemented with FDA last year. Also, it's also moving in line with the ASTM 2500. So we wanted to move towards more implementing those risk-based approaches. And we felt that we needed to come together better as one group to implement those. One of the other reasons was our risk-based approach. So we had a lot of risk assessments that we were doing, but we weren't really taking advantage of them. We were identifying the risks, but we weren't actually, taking a reduced approach then. So we felt we had to improve our risk-based approaches to testing as well. Our testing was extremely detailed, so we were going to an awful lot of effort on tests that were probably very low criticality. We'd already identified it in our risk assessments, but we weren't doing anything different with them. And then every project was doing things differently, so we wanted to standardize things more. So I suppose we kind of set about trying to implement the ONECQV then. So how we did that was we wanted to remain compliant. We still wanted, to follow with quality oversight and still remain compliant. So that wasn't changing. But as I said previously, we wanted to combine all the equipment and automation where we could. I suppose, for example, the DI is still very much something that automation would look after, data integrity. The design would be slightly different, but in any other areas like our specifications, our protocols, or testing, we wanted to combine. We also wanted to make it very much a standardized approach, so that we decided we would put a lot of effort into how we were going to roll this out. So we were rolling it out globally. We also had to make sure we had the right sponsorship and governance to make sure that the projects globally were going to implement this and follow this, because I suppose it was a big mindset change for us, and we wanted to make sure that we could have a standardized approach and move away from projects going back to doing things differently. The other one was about criticality. So as I spoke to the CSA, that was coming out with the regulations. So I suppose that really focuses on critical thinking. It's all about testing what's important, identifying what's important for your system and focusing on that. So we wanted to, as part of the ONECQV, very much within our protocols, try to implement the risk-based approach more. Try and get the testing, do robust tests where there's high risk, but do like limited test scripts where it was less risk. We also want to implement a single test approach, so not repeating things multiple times, doing it at FAT, doing it again on site, and then repeating it again from commissioning to qualification. And our ideas were with the CSA and the single test and with us working together, with all of these improvements, that our target was to reduce our documentation by 80%, which has a lot of cost for capital projects. And then the last part was, lastly, was to use vendor documents as much as possible. So I think you've all seen that vendors have SATs that they come to site testing with. And then we're inclined to go away and we'll write our own protocols and we repeat what the vendor does. So to avoid that duplicate effort, we've decided that we would use the vendor SAT more. So we are doing that now. That's implemented very well. We're using the vendor SAT and we're only writing test scripts where we absolutely have to. Okay, so I suppose this was, part of how we were going to implement it. We knew we had all these roadblocks ahead of us. We knew it wasn't going to be easy, so I suppose we had to just identify this up front. I mean, we knew that our organisational structures were very different. CQV, equipment CQV has had its own structure, automation has its own structure. We very much had our own ideas and mindsets. So, you know, we had to very much keep that in mind, how we were going to overcome those. And I suppose it is very much like taking it step by step. You know, you can't just rush in there and implement this. It's very much about rolling it out, training people up, you know, explaining to people whenever they have doubts and fears about this, trying to get them to change their mindset. So it's not, you know, it is a gradual process. So it is taking us time. We are getting there. As Dave explained, we've rolled it out to MSD now, and we have that implemented for 2 years, and we've seen a lot of success there. So now we're rolling it into animal health. Okay.
But I think that was one of the biggest changes or the hurdles to overcome. It's you know, regarding documentation-wise and updating procedures. That's one part, but it's the culture and you know, the culture of working independently for so long, and then suddenly changing to a different culture where you're working together. The CSV and C&Q coming together more. We have here, you know, blame and lack of trust. Sometimes in projects, there's conflict between the CSV team and the C&Q team. So it's trying to move people away from those polarized kind of positions and bring them together. I think that's one thing that we're able to, with Kneat, we're able to use one document. When it was digital, we're able to work on it together. But not to be underestimated is the cultural change of bringing two departments together, and the organization as well, of understanding who's doing what, who's got the D in different discussions, who's the expert in different tests. So that's where we probably added one extra step, was the test plan. We added a test plan step after our URS. We created a test plan which is based on the URS, and that detailed exactly what the testing was and who was responsible. And also we have different oversights from like a QA and a DDQ, a digital quality. So it's also assessing which QA would monitor and have oversight on which test. So that's important as well, that you don't have two QAs commenting on something that may not be their scope. So there's a bit to be done on the organization. And I think the workshops worked well initially, but it does take a lot of repeat training on this for different projects. And this is where digital validation, and this I think is an important slide regarding Kneat and why Kneat was a catalyst for this. I think there's probably two main catalysts. There was CSA approach, and there was, you know, the huge advantages of CSA, of treating high-risk tests more robustly, and then low-risk attributes with, you know, with less rigor, and, you know, targeted really at your quality testing. I think there were the main two things that actually drove us into OneCQV approach. So Kneat and the digital validation was very much key to that. So how did, well, I talk about eval here, but it's really Kneat. That's what we call our Kneat system in MSD. So we merged our equipment templates. We use our training environment in Kneat. I think it's a very useful repositories. Go into your training environment when you're trying out any new processes, and you can just muck around in there and see what issues they're having. You can even execute in there as well, and, you know, get a reassurance before you go into the production environment. We're able to use the global resources as well to approve global templates. There was a lot easier collaboration compared to doing this on paper. It would have been near impossible. It's a lot easier to do it with a digital tool. The RTM as well was probably a kind of step change for the C&Q team, but not so much the CSV. We did away with our DQ, and we use our RTM as a DQ. This is something that the CSV team were doing all along. So we just decided to use the CSV team, qualify their design of their FDS using the RTM. So we just added into that as well. So it was I think an improvement. We dropped one document by doing this, but essentially did the same work. I think the most important one for me is the global governance. Having global governance means that we could have standardized templates, for key equipment like, say, autoclave, parts washer, Wi-Fi still. You'd have standard templates, and you can push them down to your local sites, and then your local sites just have to take on the standardized approach. If they want to change it, they have to raise global variants. So you have a lot more strength on a digital tool, I think, than a paper tool to roll out standard approach. And also metrics as well. We can try and, we have a slide later on the metrics. I think Yvonne, you'll talk to that. Advantages to OneCQV, obviously what we talked about earlier, reducing workload, accepting vendor testing and the CSA test. We talked about a lot of that already. And one key part is that, defining the roles and responsibilities around trying to get the team working together. This has probably been a bit of a challenge in recent projects across the EPCM, which would be Jacobs or PM or Arcadis of the world, and the DMMD department, which would be mainly more an MSD internal team, integrating that with technical business, and the DDQ team. And it's the kind of reorganization of that and the different ways of working around the different team members.
And just finishing up with this slide, I suppose, what we're currently working at the moment, I suppose, is trying to, we have, in capital projects, there is a lot of systems involved, so we're trying to set up a tool with Kneat to look at all the documents we have in Kneat of how we're tracking them. So I know the PM group are helping us there at the moment. They have something, I think Finton and Michael McSweeney are involved in this, but they're working closely with MSD with us on a project in Ballydoyle where we're trying to implement this. We have a lot of work going on at that site. So we need to know exactly, we want to kind of look at things like our earned versus our planned versus our spent to make sure we're not burning any hours in the project. We want to look at things like if things are going late, we need to focus on what's causing it to be late, I suppose. Who's the document sitting with, so they're the kind of things we want to see. I guess we do need, I suppose, probably be looking for Kneat to help us a little bit more there and that about how we can actually, see who the document is with, and so hopefully there can be improvements made here as well. But this is what we're actively working on at the moment, like creating these dashboards with Kneat, which is where our documents sit. Yeah.
I think it's something that C&Q, like my large CapEx projects, struggle with, is getting an earned value curve. It's a lot of projects I've worked on, it's very hard to get an accurate earned value curve. Pulling from pulling from a schedule that's normally out of date. It could be a month out of date before they update it. So, offering a standard solution across the MSD network, which we're trying to achieve here, will hopefully pay dividends, that you're not setting up the schedule every time uniquely different, that you have structures around the schedule, and should be more accurate, more up to date KPIs from a project. What we're trying to work towards here. Okay, I think that's it for us. It's a good, probably a lot quicker than the last one. Yeah.
Hi, Andy Dorwood from Eli Lilly. Just to agree with you on the ability on reporting. I would say for phase 1 on Limerick, that was quite a difficult task. And again, working with partners to try and do our best with it. And I know that's something Kneat's working towards, but just to reiterate, that would be very valuable.
Yes.
I'd say the only other bit on, I thought the way you're combining stuff there was really interesting and a very efficient way of working. I was just interested on the vendor documents, and I know lots of pharma companies like to do stuff their own way, which can make it worse, but I'm thinking with vendor documents, quite often the SATs are standard. Did you convince the vendors to incorporate some of your testing requirements into it, or did you keep your requirements more generic? And how did you go about being able to utilize vendor testing carried out by vendors? Was it through an auditing approach? How did you kind of justify bringing that data set into your C&Q process?
Yep. Will I take this one down? Yeah. So I suppose with the vendor sets, there's a couple of questions now you had in that. So the first part was that we would always upfront ask them to incorporate our testing. I suppose we try to do a lot of work as well at the tender process, you know, where we're trying, before we place the PO, to say, you know, and they're signing up to the URS, they're agreeing to this being tested. However, and when it comes to the set, they agree to it all up front when we get the set. We find they do give us their standard document initially, so we have to, you know, we have to influence them to add in the tests. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not, and they're just going to delay us and we know they're not going to change it, so we just have to move on, right? But we always try initially, right? We have found like that a lot of vendors' standard of the documents are quite good, you know. In general, like the majority of vendors we've dealt with, standard is good, so we have been able to use them. And it might be only that it's a kind of a particular requirement that they don't put into their standard test. It's not the quality of the document, it's more that's not in their standard document. So sometimes it's just easier for us to just add that test script then. But we do, like we have found it very successful, because prior to that we weren't assessing it, we were just writing all the tests again ourselves. Yeah, so, and Kneat, to be fair, has been very helpful in that regard, because you can attach in the vendor document, you can look at the test scripts that you have to write, it makes it so much easier for everyone to review it all in one go. So, yeah. I think you had another question within that as well.
Regarding...
It was just on the audit, on the ability to utilise
yes.
them in their testing.
Yes. So, we like, at the beginning, when we would request our standard documents, we would have the whole team involved in reviewing. We would have technical, with very much of quality involved as well. The auditing, we kind of manage, like we also would request through SOPs and change management. We would very much focus on that and how they do deviations. So we would be aware of how they do that up front. We would look for examples and we would monitor that process. We also have our own change control process, and we kind of, we combine with the vendor change control process as well. So that actually works very well for us to manage all of that. Yeah.
You mentioned Limerick, you had difficulty getting accurate KPIs and earned value. What was your main constraint around that?
I think it was mainly just extracting the information. We were into a situation where we were having to do a download every morning.
From Kneat or from Primavera?
From Kneat, and certainly on the previous revision, if I recall, you couldn't actually get reviewer data. What you could get approval data and the status there. You could get when it went into review, but you couldn't get the reviewer IDs or whether they completed their review. So I'd say tracking for approvals was all right. Tracking for review status was quite challenging.
Yeah. So hopefully we can make improvements there. Or we'll be
Hi, my name is Kieran Courtney from Eli Lilly Kinsale, and I think what you've touched on there is what a lot of organisations endeavour to do. You know, we all want standardisation and simplification, but we want to be the ones that are standardised with, rather than we standardise with other people. So in a group where you had people who were maybe come from different backgrounds, would have worked well together, but not integrated as efficiently as you are now. How did you have somebody champion that change, or did it come from the top, or did people integrate easily, efficiently? How would you recommend a company approach that?
I think the very important part there is having the sponsorship from the top. So that's where we started. We started off with sponsorship at the top, and it very much worked from the top down. It kind of, we had to have that backing because it was so, we just had our two separate swim lanes, you know, and I think that is very important, and it still is. Like, as I said, we implemented the ONECQV 2 years ago, but we still have areas where we clash, you know, that we very much have, equipment would have had their own ideas coming from 2 years ago, and automation. So you still need their support, I think, because, you know, so that you can reach an agreement on things, you know. Just, I suppose we're still on that we're at the end of that rocky road I showed you earlier, but it's still, you know, it does take time. So I think you do need the sponsorship from the top down, and you need that governance to continue. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thanks, Yvonne. Dave, Pascal Ryan here from Pfizer Global Engineering. We've been on the identical journey as well as yourselves, and we've just completed a project to mandate one C&Q model across all our global facilities. I suppose the latest version of the ISB baseline guide is a revelation to us because from a qualification perspective, the system is direct or not direct. The whole middle ground of indirect is now no longer recognised. And you mentioned there about the URSs. I felt that a lot of our mistakes were made on the first two steps of qualification, system classification and URS. And then given what are we asking for, what are we getting with the vendors. So we made a decision to make the URS a GMP document only, and the technical specification and the engineering design does the rest. Our URS drives qualification, and it gets you to a very lean, you know, the last 20% of direct CQAs, CPPs, and everything else is GEP. Did you look at that when you went on this journey? Are ye gone the route of direct or not direct? The indirect is no longer part of qualification because there was an awful lot of inefficiencies in there. And is your URS, or URSs became 100-page documents, which became very difficult from a qualification. Now they're 20-page concise GMP documents. I'm just interested if you went the same route.
Well, yeah, we did. We went direct, non-direct, and we also used the SMART technique. I think it's referenced on some ISP paper. You know, SMART approach to URSs. Don't know the full acronym, specific, measurable, I don't know, can you help me out?
Putting me on the spot now.
Yeah, but anyway, we use that acronym. I think you can find it on some ISP papers of how you approach URSs. So we very much thinned out the URSs and moved everything to the engineering spec. We also had to make the URS that it was testable, that all our, I think that's what the T in SMART is, that it's testable, so it's very clear what the test is going to be. So there's no ambiguity later on about what do we ask for here, how do we test this.
Yeah.
The only place that the not direct systems come up is automation. Sometimes look for traceability for automated systems. So in some cases, for complex systems, we allowed an RS, just an RS only for some non-directs. You know, maybe like a decon audit lathe or some waste and complex waste system or something like this.
Yeah, and I suppose we focus, it's very much about what the user wants, not the how. I suppose that's one thing that we all, because that's what was happening, similar to what you were saying there, with all the engineering going into it and the design. People are inclined to, the URSs they can creep very fast. So you really have to kind of, keep control of that, to focus on what the user wants to make it efficient, and the how should go into the engineering specs and the design specs. So, and we very much keep it for direct impact systems. We rarely do a URS for not direct, as Dave was saying. It would only be a complex, not direct system.
And it was mainly the C&Q team, like for issued for purchase URS, the technical team would send out the URS, but then at some point later on in the design, the URS was brought into Kneat, but it was the C&Q team and the CSV team who would have oversight at that stage to make sure it was kind of cleaned up before it went up onto Kneat.
Hi, Dennis Keller from Gilead. Did you have Kneat before you did your OneCQV project, or was it at the same time, and did one facilitate the other, if you know what I mean?
Well, I did.
Probably back.
Yeah, so we, yes, we had Kneat implemented on all our sites, you know, throughout the divisions at this stage. So we were very familiar with Kneat at that point, so within both groups, the automation and CQV. So that's why it was so, what we found was really helpful then, because we were easily able to see each other's documents, and when we were combining all of them, we all had easy access. You know, we weren't relying on sharing things by emails or setting up SharePoints or anything like that. And we were all able to comment on the one document. So yeah, we very much had Kneat implemented, which was very, very helpful. Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
All right,
Another one.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dave
Thank you.
and Yvonne.
Thank you.
Cheers.